Hi everyone, and welcome to Bob's Wood Stuff. Today I'll be showing you how I carved this porg out of wood for a friend of mine. Let's go to the shop.
I started by glue laminating 3 1.5-inch pieces of alder to create a larger wood block. Then I used an acetone transfer technique to get the design onto the piece of wood. Look in the description for a link to this transfer technique. I cut out the basic shape on the bandsaw, tracing the outside of the design. I left some spare wood on the side of the design and glued a scrap piece on the side near the top to get a flat reference surface while I bandsawed it from the other side. At this point I drew a wing onto each side with a pencil, and then started chiseling around the contour of the wings. I then used a slick chisel to remove more of the material and do some shaping. And I used a smaller chisel to shave off the corners of the wings and make them more round. Then used a series of gouges and chisels to refine the curves and round off the rest of the body. After that, I started to define the face shape. I drew the main face sections with pencil and then carved them out with carving tools, defining the contours of the mouth and eyes. I used 2 glass aquarium beads to make the eyes. I painted the flat side with acrylic paint, starting with a black circle for the pupils, and then I added some metallic brown for the iris. Check the description of this video for links to glass eye painting tutorials. I placed some masking tape on the eye area, and then drilled recessed holes with a Forstner bit just slightly larger than the glass eyes. The masking tape helps to prevent grain tear out while drilling the holes. Then I used a wood burner to burn feather textures around the eye areas. I continued this process on the head and the wings, and then the rest of the body. I used my Dremel with a sanding drum to do some texturing and emphasize the feathers on the back of the bird. One of the eyes was not aligned properly, so I added some plaster of Paris to the eye socket to align it with the other socket. I used my wood burner with a triangle tip to indent some areas and emphasize the layering of the feathers. I'm pretty happy with the texture at this point, so I'll move on to painting. I drilled some holes into the bottom of the body, inserted some dowels into them, drilled holes into a block of wood, and then placed the legs into the block. I chucked the dowels into my drill press and used a triangular needle file to make some textured rings on the legs. Then I glued the legs into the body. I sprayed the whole thing with 2 coats of primer paint. I needed to fill some gaps in the eye sockets, so I mixed some plaster of Paris. I wanted the eye socket to be dark on the inside, so I put black ink in the plaster. I spread the plaster into the eye sockets and placed the eyes on top of them. I kept adding more plaster until the sockets were full, and then cleaned up the excess with a cotton swab. To add eyelids, I needed some epoxy putty and rolled it into snakes. Then I placed it around the outside of the eye sockets and smushed it into place. I also used a chopstick to add some texturing. I mixed some acrylic paint and painted the face and stomach an off-white color. Then I painted the body with a gray-brown color. I mixed some dark brown paint and watered it down. Then I brushed it on and wiped it off with a rag, which emphasized the feather texture. I needed a block of wood for the feet and base, so I glued 2 redwood 4x4s together. I drilled the leg dowels into the base and drew the foot shape and base outline. I cut out the base with my bandsaw. Then I scooped out the bottom of the base with a gouge. I started carving the area around the feet, removing material on the base. I continued carving away the top with various gouges. This redwood was not a great species for carving. Then I did the final shaping on the feet. I spray primered the base assembly. I mixed a red-orange color and then painted it on the area around the eyes. Then I wiped the dark brown paint on it to deepen the color. I mixed a light gray paint and brushed it on the base so it looks like a rock. Then I used a small brush with white paint to add some details, such as white feathers. And I brushed some medium gray paint on the base and wiped it off, to add some depth to the color. Then I glued the legs into the base. I modeled some epoxy putty around the foot joints to make a smoother transition between the feet and legs. I mixed a pale yellow color and then painted the feet. Then I painted details with a darker orangish color. At this point I was happy with the results, so I called it finished.
Overall, this was a really fun project. It came out really well, and the eyes are pretty spectacular. It encourages me to make more eyes for things like owls or carving waterfowl in the future. I hope you liked it, and please subscribe. Thanks. Bye.